What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and I told the guys over at Quid that I'd make a video about this app that you have that that Quid has, where you can throw like stickers and text messages, which is kind of interesting. They give you like new points. It's all based on points, and you get like I guess coins, and you get like new coins every few hours, like more coins. They've got these little stickers that you throw in text messages, which is kind of cool. Let's grab like Ninja Turtles. I think I already have Ninja Turtles. I don't remember off the top of my head. Oh, I guess we have to go to shop. There we go. And then we'll go with Michelangelo, because everybody knows Michelangelo is the best one. So we'll go with Michelangelo. And you get this cool unwrapping feature, which is actually kind of, oh, it's all of them. Michelangelo, Donatello, Raphael, Leonardo. Okay, cool. All right. So anyway, so you can go into like your text messages, and let's grab a buddy of mine, Daniel. Let's send him a picture of 80s bad guy. Where's 80s bad guy? Like this is 80s bad guy right here. Let's send him a picture of 80s bad guy, and then we can go into Quid, and then we can grab like Ninja Turtles. All right, so then we can grab like one of the Ninja Turtles and throw him on there, and now he's like 80s Ninja Turtle. It's a terrible joke. Anyway, I thought you guys might dig it, so I mean, it's in the App Store. You can check it out. But anyway, on to our video. Okay, so we got caught up with the new 52 Batman, right? Like we said, we wanted to take our DC days and we wanted to cover new 52 Batman. Wonder Woman, the movie came out. We got caught up with Wonder Woman. Sundays is our Green Lantern Day, and we got caught up with Green Lantern. Ion Volume 1, Mystery of the Star Sapphires, Rob Corps. Man, let me tell you something, man. Now, let me tell you something now. Sinestro Corps War. God, this story is so good. This story is nuts. It's absolutely insane. This is just the prelude, too. This isn't even like the main story. This is just the prelude, and it's absolutely insane. This is one of the most bonkers stories that I've ever read, in a good way. It's crazy in a good way. It's crazy and it's exciting in a good way. Let us get into this. Let us cover this. So the cool thing about this is like right off the bat, we just get like the motivations of Sinestro, right? I mean, it's Sinestro Corps, the Yellow Lanterns. We get his motivations right off the bat. And that's the cool thing about this, because the first thing we're told is that like Sinestro, he absolutely abhors anything that does not fall in line with what he considers to be like structure and regiment. And we knew that, right? Like we knew the whole story of Sinestro, with him falling from the Green Lantern Corps, all of it was rooted in the fact that where he was the greatest member of the Green Lanterns, the greatest of their kind, one of the most capable, he eventually succumbed to fear. The reason being because of the fact that as a Green Lantern, he believed that there needed to be absolute order. There needed to be absolute structure. And it was always with the smallest thing. It's like the quintessential example of Batman about why he doesn't kill. All you have to do is justify it once, and then you can justify it 1,000 times over. That's the position of Sinestro. Like he took his ring and he said, we're going to institute absolute order and absolute structure on his home planet, and then in turn tried to influence that across the universe. Now, of course, that led to the Guardians of the Universe realizing what it was that he was doing, casting him out of the Green Lantern Corps and forcing him really to just kind of run into retreat, eventually becoming a bad guy and the most notable enemy of Hal Jordan. What this tells us is that initially where he believed that he was doing the right thing, which is why he was able to invoke willpower the way he was, he eventually realized that it was fear. It was fear of the fact that he would basically lose what it was that made him who he was. That he would lose control over his sector, that he would basically fail in his mission. Not only that, he came to believe that because of the fact that he was able to institute the kind of order that he did, that came from the fact that people were afraid of him. They feared for him. And so that's when he began to realize that fear is the best motivation for forcing people to do the things that you want them to do. And that's the coolest thing about this, is because remember, the emotional spectrum exists out there as this sort of disembodied thing that basically is fed by all beings in existence. But it's only until recently people learned how to tap into it. The Guardians of the Universe learned it, but in terms of other people, it's this little thing that happens every once in a while. For example, Atrocitus, his whole family slaughtered, his entire sector is massacred by the Manhunters, and he in turn, in his rage and in his anger, is able to tap into the emotional spectrum of rage, which in turn allows him to create the Red Lantern Corps. Of course, we'll get into that, all that stuff later on down the line. But for Sinestro, feeding into his own fear, really kind of feeding into the concept of fear itself, he's in turn able to tap into the fear aspect of the emotional spectrum and then effectively make himself the first of the Yellow Lanterns. Now, this is so cool because remember, over the course of this whole idea of the Sinestro Corps growing, what we're told is that this little segment of Sinestro basically forming his core is basically a backstory. It takes place in the past. What ended up happening is in the modern day, we know that right now, or at least at the time the story is being told, that he sent rings out to basically grow his Sinestro Corps army. And one of these rings had approached Batman and said, "You have the power to instill great fear. Welcome to the Sinestro Corps," and then ultimately cast him out once it realized that he had used the Green Lantern ring of Hal Jordan. And that's why we covered a lot of that stuff, because those things were so important and they set the stage for things that would come later on down the line. They were small moments, they were tiny little things that took place, but they all built to this greater thing. And that's how Geoff Johns wrote his Green Lantern story, is a thing would happen in a panel, or something would take place in a page that would seem out of place and totally unnecessary. And then like 5 or 6 stories later on down the line, the entirety of a set of events hinders on what happened in that one page. And that's why this is so cool, man. Let me tell you something, man. Geoff Johns, man. This guy knows how to write stories. But that's why it's so cool, because remember, you know, with the whole Secret Society, as it was formed by Lex Luthor after, I guess, before and during the events of Infinite Crisis, Sinestro had served as part of that group. Now, of course, we also saw him, you know, basically serving alongside Eobard Thawne, so on and so forth. And the reason why that matters is because following the Sinestro Corps ring approaching Batman and trying to bring Batman into its ranks, Batman basically went and told the rest of the Justice League, "Something's going on. I was approached by the equivalent of what looked like Hal Jordan's ring, except it was yellow, and it said, 'Welcome to the Sinestro Corps.'" Hal Jordan, of course, intervenes, begins investigating, and that was the whole idea of what it is the Justice League is doing with Eobard Thawne. They're basically tracking down all these leads on what the Sinestro Corps is and what the Sinestro Corps is about, but no one has any answers to that. No one knows the answer to this riddle. Now, of course, again, transitioning over to Kyle Rayner, keep in mind, with him, we know he's Ion at this point in time. Now, explicitly what that means, we'll actually find out in this story, which is what's so cool. But all we really know is that as the Torchbearer, he basically holds a place beyond all the other Green Lanterns. He doesn't require a ring in order to do the things that he does. Not only that, he's basically the sole person that's going to be able to bring back all of the Green Lanterns and the Guardians of the Universe should they all end up being destroyed. Now, again, why he's able to do that, we'll get into that in this video. But him basically showing up coincides with, you know, a little bit of a conflict with a couple of lanterns, but the arrival of this this Yellow Lantern ring, which again says, you know, you do not have the ability to instill great fear, you have not been chosen, and basically takes off and ends up going and finding a suitable host. Now, of course, Kyle Rayner follows him along this path, or at least follows this ring to its most logical conclusion. But at this point, we jump over to the Guardians of the Universe. And so, of course, remember, all this stuff takes place after the events of Infinite Crisis. And so for those of you guys who are just joining my channel who never went through Infinite Crisis, you'll find the videos down in the description for a more detailed explanation. But the long and short of it is that Infinite Crisis served the purpose of restoring the multiverse. That was basically it. You know, Crisis on Infinite Earths saw the multiverse being eliminated in its entirety and was basically replaced with a singular universe called New Earth. Infinite Crisis saw the multiverse brought back. Now, this does invoke the question of what happened with one of the most notable members of the multiverse, which again, we'll get into that as we get through this story. But the fact remains that the way the multiverse stands right now, at least as is explained to us by, you know, the Guardians of the Universe, is that it's really just kind of standing on a knife's edge in the sense that you have the main DC universe, and then on top of that are all these different Earths. And so if the main DC universe Earth were to be destroyed, it would send a cascading event that would basically wipe out the multiverse. But the other half of this is, remember, we dealt with the return of Cyborg Superman, and all we really knew was that the Cyborg Superman had been defeated at some point in time. His mind had basically been stuck inside the source wall, the wall that basically keeps the entire DC universe contained. But from that point, he basically resurrected himself, restored the Manhunters. Again, you'll find all this stuff down in the description, and then in turn, basically began creating an army for himself. Now, of course, the Manhunters served as the group that the Guardians of the Universe used before they created the Green Lantern Corps, in the sense that the Manhunters are basically just robots. Remember, the Guardians of the Universe sat down and basically said, look, if we're going to be the police force, so to speak, of the universe, meaning we're going to look around the universe and do everything we can to keep it safe, we have to be impartial. We cannot allow ourselves to be governed by emotion. And so what we have to do is basically separate ourselves from the entirety of that ideology. And so they basically purge themselves of all emotion. Now, what this does is it basically says, look, with them going through and creating the Manhunters basically went awry, they rebelled, the Manhunters were decommissioned, quote unquote, and then the Green Lantern Corps was created in place of the Manhunters. And so that's where the entirety of the Green Lantern Corps comes from. Now, following the events of Infinite Crisis, when the multiverse was restored and the mind of Cyborg Superman was freed, allowing him to basically recreate his own body, what this meant was that Cyborg Superman had knowledge of the fact that the multiverse was back. He had knowledge of what was beyond the main DC universe and all the other universes that were available. Now, the reason why this matters is because of the fact that with him showing up, this basically begins the process of fulfilling the prophecy of Blackest Night. Now, the prophecy of Blackest Night is amazing, and we're going to get into like the Blackest Night story, dude. That's, oh my God, man, I'm gonna do Blackest Night. If God was writing comic books right now, that's what it would look like right now. Blackest Night is so good. It's one of the best stories that I've ever read, like in general, absolutely mind-blowing. Like, oh dude, it gets so cool. Anyway, the whole idea here is that this begins a process of fulfilling the Blackest Night, and we're literally told what it was. You know, a face of metal and flesh shall speak the secrets of the 52 new universes. You know, fear will rise, willpower will gather, basically meaning that the Sinestro Corps will begin to rise to prominence, and the Green Lanterns will have to respond, and a war of light will unleash the truth behind the power of the ring. This is the entire basis behind the prophecy of the Blackest Night. Now again, this is considered to be forbidden knowledge. This is something they don't talk about. It's the forbidden fruit. You know, it's not something that the Guardians of the Universe delve in. Now, of course, the reason why this is considered to be forbidden is because of the fact that, remember, with Abin Sur having been the Green Lantern that passed his ring on to Hal Jordan, Abin Sur was told of the prophecy of the Blackest Night by Atrocitus himself, the leader of the Red Lantern Corps. And so because of all that, again, that stuff's covered in my video on the secret origin of Hal Jordan, but because of that stuff, because of the fact that the Guardians of the Universe don't believe it's real, they basically consider it to be nonsense. They consider it to be an instance of Atrocitus the Red Lantern playing on the idea of Abin Sur in the sense of basically making him scared and stripping him of his willpower. Because remember, a Green Lantern can only really remain a Green Lantern and use their ring to its full capacity so long as they maintain willpower and they don't allow themselves to succumb to fear. And so the Guardians of the Universe basically looked at this prophecy and said, these are the ravings of a madman. Atrocitus and Abin Sur were fighting one another. Atrocitus said, oh, there's a prophecy of the Blackest Night, hoping it would erode the willpower of Abin Sur, which in turn would lead to him being unable to defeat Atrocitus. That's basically how the Guardians of the Universe believe this. What we end up finding out is that that's not true. The prophecy of the Blackest Night is very much true. Now again, one of the things that we also end up doing is we basically pick up with Guy Gardner kind of racing off and talking to Salak, who's basically, again, this sort of voice for the decisions that are made by the Guardians of the Universe. And of course, you know, Guy Gardner basically says, look, Sinestro's back. Sinestro has returned. We have to figure out what's going on with what we're calling the Sinestro Corps. We don't really know what it is or what it's about. Well, in the middle of this huge gathering with all these Green Lanterns that have been brought together by the Guardians of the Universe, suddenly a Sinestro Corps ring appears, and as it's going around hunting for hosts, it immediately realizes that Kyle Rayner's there. Now, this is cool, and this is why this is so interesting. When it comes to the Green Lantern rings, they're very linear, right? Like, they don't really have like a mind of their own. I mean, they do to a degree, but like if a Green Lantern gets killed, the ring will automatically go out and seek a new host. It'll say, you know, Green Lantern of sector, you know, 3416 or something like that, deceased, seeking a new host, and it'll just race off and it'll find a new host, and it'll basically come across someone that says, you have great willpower, the power to overcome great fear, you have been chosen, welcome to the Green Lantern Corps, something along those lines, and it'll whisk them off to Oa to begin the process of being trained. Now, of course, at that point, they can basically rebuke the ring and say, I do not want to be a Green Lantern, and the ring will choose somebody else. But in this instance, the Sinestro Corps ring, when it's hunting around, immediately recognizes Kyle Rayner as somebody unique among all of the Green Lanterns. It captures him and it whisks him away to the antimatter universe, to the planet of Cord. Now again, one of the things that we need to talk about here for a second are the Cordians themselves. This is really Jeff Johns sort of drawing on a lot of the old school Green Lantern stuff, in the sense that even way back in the day, before Jeff Johns came along and before he revamped a lot of these origins, really telling the backstory of Sinestro, what we knew was that where Sinestro was the greatest of the Green Lanterns, somewhere along the line, he got his Yellow Lantern ring. And what happened were the Cordians were basically the ones that fashioned the ring for him. This ring that basically fed on the color yellow. Because remember, back in the day, you know, back before Jeff Johns took over, back in the 60s and 70s, really even the 80s and going into the 90s, there was no answer for why it is that, you know, Green Lanterns are weak to the color yellow. It's just, they just are. That's just their weakness. It's just the way it is. And so with Sinestro having a Yellow Lantern ring that allowed him to do everything that a Green Lantern ring did, but basically defeat a Green Lantern because the Green Lanterns couldn't counter the color yellow, in turn, this basically was established as the idea that the Weaponers of Cord, these people in the antimatter universe, basically a different universe from the main DC universe itself, they basically fashioned this ring for him. Now, of course, a lot of this was included, changed, or eliminated with regards to what it is that Jeff Johns is doing now, but the fact remains that when Kyle Rayner is whisked off to the planet Cord, to this home base of where it was that Sinestro was confined to when he became a bad guy as a Green Lantern and was held, you know, in a prison of sorts by the Guardians of the Universe, he arrives to end up seeing that all these Cordians have been totally eliminated. And the reason why is because Sinestro now has his army that measures in the there's thousands of yellow lanterns everywhere. I mean, he's on a planet surrounded by yellow lanterns. He's in what's probably the worst situation that any Green Lantern could be in. And so because of this, Sinestro immediately grabs Kyle Rayner and says, we're taking you. You are going to be a host for Parallax, the entity of fear, the embodiment of fear. Now, this is the process in which Jeff Johns begins moving away from the idea of using metaphors, of saying like, the embodiment of fear and different things like that, and actually gives us physical ideas, physical constructs, where Kyle Rayner fights back as best he can. In the end, he's just not able to pull it off. I mean, the yellow impurity is basically gone. I mean, that was an explanation that was given really in Green Lantern Rebirth, where it was established that Parallax is the living embodiment of fear in the entirety of the universe. And Parallax had basically been defeated at some point along the line and was imprisoned in the Green Lantern Central Power Battery, which is where all the Green Lanterns get their power from. The reason for the yellow impurity simply comes from the fact that Parallax was inside the Central Power Battery. Eventually, when, Hal Jordan more or less lost his mind, when he went through, he became, he declared himself to be Parallax, all that kind of good stuff, and he was possessed by the Parallax entity. The idea was that when he destroyed the entirety of the Green Lantern Corps, because Parallax had bonded with Hal Jordan, Parallax was no longer in the Central Power Battery. And the reason why this matters is because following the defeat of Hal Jordan and Kyle Rayner basically going through and resurrecting the entirety of the Green Lantern Corps and the Central Power Battery, this basically brought them back without the yellow impurity, without, Parallax inside the Central Power Battery, which is why they don't have a weakness to the color yellow. That's why all that takes place. So for some of you guys, hopefully the light bulb's going off. You're just kind of like, oh, okay, I understand what's going on, because that was basically what was taking place. It was the idea of Jeff Johns sort of, fixing everything, clearing everything up, and setting the stage for where we are right now. And so the crazy thing about this is that while we have all these different members of the Sinestro Corps who have basically left the planet Cord and are assaulting Oa, the homeworld of the Green Lanterns, in the middle of this whole conflict, suddenly some 30 or 40 Green Lantern rings just go whisking by, talking about how their existing lanterns have all been killed. And the question is, well, who was it that did it? If somebody went through and killed all these Green Lanterns in one shot, then who was it that pulled it off? Well, we end up transitioning over to the science cells, only to find out that Superboy Prime is gone. Man, that's one of the coolest things about this, because remember, in our videos on Infinite Crisis, we had talked about how Superboy Prime had basically become a bad guy. He had become a villain. And in doing so, at the end of the entire conflict, he was basically encased in a giant box of pure willpower by the Guardians of the Universe and was kept in stasis, was basically kept in the presence of red radiation to keep him from being able to use his powers and keep him from being able to escape. That's how he's been held in prison this entire time. And so the idea seems to be here that essentially Superboy Prime has been given a yellow lantern ring. He's become part of the Sinestro Corps, and that's how he was able to escape. So the cool thing about this is we switch back over to Sinestro. That's one of the really interesting things here, because Sinestro begins the process of talking about how for him, the entire popularity, or really the entire idea of the Sinestro Corps, is predicated on the notion of instilling fear. And so what they're doing is they're basically going around and gathering all these different people who basically have the power to instill fear in virtually anybody across the universe. Superboy Prime, with the swath that he cut through the superhero community. I mean, remember, during Infinite Crisis, Superboy Prime took on the Teen Titans, Young Justice, and the Justice League all at the same time. I mean, that guy was stupid overpowered. It was crazy. But the fear that he engendered was enough that he caught the attention of Sinestro and said, that guy is a must. Not only that, with regards to Kyle Rayner being this, being Ion and having the ability to basically resurrect the Green Lantern Corps, the reason for why this is done is because he's the host for the embodiment of willpower, the Ion Whale, basically the Green Lantern Whale. That's what he is, and that's how he's been able to pull off what it is that he's been able to do. We didn't know this. This is something that was basically introduced to us, this like a fresh piece of information. Prior to this, all we knew is the Guardians of the Universe just said, you will be the one who will bring back the Green Lantern Corps should we all die. And we didn't know why. With regards to him being the host for willpower, what this means is that now in this instance, that this is how he's able to resurrect them. He's literally the embodiment of willpower itself. But if he's the host for pure willpower, he can be the host for anything else. It's like taking the battery out of something and putting a new battery in. And that's exactly what Sinestro does. Sinestro says, all you need to do is feel feel fear. If I can strip you of your willpower, if I can pull this living embodiment of willpower out of you, then you have nothing to feed on anymore. You have no way to keep your will going. So all I have to do is put something in its place. Now at this point, it's eroding whatever willpower Kyle Rayner has left. And this is when Sinestro begins the process of feeding on all the terrible experiences that Kyle Rayner's had over the course of his life. The fact that his original girlfriend was killed, the fact that his mother died, all these instances, and saying, these are all your fault. And so again, what this whole idea is basically saying is, Kyle Rayner, all the worst experiences you've ever had in your life are your fault. And by making him experience all these things, it in turn begins the process of eroding the willpower of Kyle Rayner, which ultimately makes him the perfect host for Parallax. And that's what happens. Parallax is let loose, and the living embodiment of fear across the universe merges with Kyle Rayner, making him the new Parallax. And so what we end up doing is, of course, we have Kyle Rayner basically asking the question, when do I get to kill folks? And this is when Sinestro says, we'll start that soon. In the meantime, we have to marshal our forces. And so what we learn is that in addition to Superboy Prime, who looks amazing as a Yellow Lantern, by the way, the Anti-Monitor has been inducted into the Sinestro Corps. The Anti-Monitor was resurrected with the return of the multiverse. Remember, the Anti-Monitor is intrinsic to the multiverse itself. If it's there, he's there. It's just the way it works. And so the Anti-Monitor has effectively been inducted into the Sinestro Corps due to the fact that with the Anti-Monitor's desire to basically absorb and obliterate all life in existence and recreate everything in existence, he instills fear better than most anybody else. There's also Cyborg Superman, because of the fact that he instills so much fear as being one of the most notable villains following the death of Superman. So again, the ranks are being grown, the numbers are increasing, and what this does is lead into this insane conflict that's really one of the greatest stories ever told, like in the history of comic books. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna go ahead and bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like. Next Sunday, or I guess this coming Sunday, we will pick up with Sinestro Corps War Part 1. So I'm really excited. I'm really hyped to bring that story to you guys. And yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.